You're listening to the Secure Dad Podcast. Discover ways to secure your home, protect your family, and embrace your role as a protector parent. Welcome, friend. I'm Andy Murphy, the creator of the Secure Dad. This podcast serves to help families become proactive in their safety. The information I share on this podcast is for general information purposes only. My goal is to empower you to make safer decisions for yourself and your family, because our safety is our own responsibility. Today, I welcome a very knowledgeable guest to talk to us about how we can vanquish denial in our life and in times of immediate, necessary action. All of that and more ahead on the Secure Dad Podcast. As if phishing emails and phone scams are not enough, there are sites that are posing as personal data removal services that are ripoffs. Yes, there are sites that appear to offer the same service as Delete Me, but they are fake. Sketchy, right? Don't hand over your family's personal information to people you don't know anything about. You may think that any privacy service will do, but trust me, it won't. You need the professionals at Delete Me. If you want to get your personal information removed from search sites, go to joindeleteme.com/dad. They're offering 20% off their privacy plans to everyone listening with the code DAD. Don't fall for a scam site. Not everyone with a search engine ad can be trusted. This is your personal data. You must fully trust the company that has this valuable information. I have trusted Delete Me since 2018 with my family's privacy. Start today at joindeleteme.com/dad and use promo code DAD to get 20% off today. I'm proud to have Delete Me as a sponsor of this podcast. For those of you with small kids, you might be interested in the new podcast that I have started. My son and I have created a silly podcast for kids called Farmer Brown's Dinosaur Farm. This podcast is safe and appropriate for kids. There's no hidden agenda, just stories to spark imaginations. Isn't it nice to see that in kids' media? You can listen to the podcast wherever you are listening to this one, plus we are on YouTube. To keep up with the podcast, like us on Facebook when you search for Farmer Brown's Dinosaur Farm. My guest on the show is Mike O'Rourke of Advanced Operational Concepts. Mike has operated Advanced Operational Concept, a bespoke global security management and intelligence solutions company, for more than 14 years. Before that, Mike was a Green Beret and worked all over the globe. Here's my conversation with Mike O'Rourke. So, Mike, thank you so much for being on the show today. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Yeah, Andy, thanks for having me on the Secure Dad podcast. I've followed you for some time, and I definitely like what you're doing. My name is Mike O'Rourke. I'm a retired Special Forces soldier or Green Beret. I served on active duty for 24 years, with about the last 20 of that in Special Forces. Was assigned to the 1st Special Forces Group at Fort Lewis, Washington. That post is now called Joint Base Lewis McChord. 1st Group has responsibility for the Indo-PACOM theater, so I spent a lot of time deployed to across to East and Southeast Asia. My team was in Sri Lanka during their civil war, where we nearly missed the truck bombing of our hotel after our presence was publicized. And we also spent a few months in Laos training people to find and safely dispose of unexploded ordnance that we dropped on the Ho Chi Minh Trail during the Vietnam War. Back at Fort Bragg, now called Fort Liberty, I spent 4 years as a Special Forces sniper instructor. Besides the shooting and observing aspect, what really helped me there was being up in front of my Green Beret peers teaching classes. And that's something that still serves me well today as we go out and train folks. Everyone in SF has a language based on their area of responsibility. So I studied Thai. That has come in handy both on active duty and during my business travels. When 9/11 happened, I was stationed in Okinawa as part of a special unit with a classified mission within 1st Group called the Commanders in Extremis Force. Before long, we were deployed on Operation Enduring Freedom Philippines, assisting their national level counterterrorism force, which we'd helped create the year before, in their fight against the Abu Sayyaf group, which was personally financed by, I think, bin Laden's brother or brother-in-law, who personally brought the money to fund them. A few years later, I deployed to Iraq as a team sergeant, which is the senior NCO on a Special Forces team. And in between those deployments, I was brought into what I call the gray side of Special Forces. And that's the low visibility side where you might operate alone in a foreign country and your
Hmm.
situational awareness is the only thing keeping you safe.
Gotcha.
The need to pass those skills along to the next generation of operators was the genesis for founding our company.
Very cool. Very cool. So you have had quite the career so far doing some outstanding work across the globe. Well, let me ask you, what got you into the military? And then, when you got out, why did you start advanced operational concepts?
Well, from the ages of 4 to 10, I was going to be the next Jacques Cousteau or one of his scuba divers.
Uh,
The When I was a kid, his undersea specials would come on TV, and I was just riveted, glued to the television. But then when I was 10, again back to the television influence, the old John Wayne movie, The Green Berets, came on one
mm,
Saturday afternoon, and
hmm.
suddenly I had a new mission in life. If if that had never happened, you might be seeing me as a marine biologist on Shark Week.
Very
Uh,
cool.
Early in our company's history, which I mentioned, we founded to pass those skills along to the current generation of operators. I realized that a lot of these were transferable to the private sector. Things like countering economic espionage from China, preventing workplace violence, finding insider threats, collecting and analyzing atmospheric intelligence, and teaching situational awareness all transfer well to the private sector. So even though we're still working with our special operations forces from the Army, Army Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Marine Raiders, a bulk of our work now is focus on private sector corporations, family offices, and ultra high net worth individuals.
Yeah, I like the fact that you're taking your experience that you got from the military and you realize that, hey, this is transferable, outside beyond the military. And that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. For me, just being the average person, what is it that I need to know that's going to keep my family safe? I know it's broad, but like, what's something basic that I need to know to keep my family safe?
Well, I think the key to individual and family safety is the mental game.
Hmm.
We call this switching on.
Yeah.
Back in the special operations world, it's deliberately flipping that mental switch that says, I'm going to start paying attention to the world around me and the people and things that move through the world with me.
Hmm.
Your circle of awareness now extends beyond the space your family occupies when you're at the mall, at the park, or walking to your car. You're extending the sweep range of your personal security radar. I mean, like we tell people as an example, like before you get out of your vehicle, you're going to do a visual 5 yard sweep, around your vehicle, and then 25 yards.
Yep.
And then that's directly related to how we used to, make sure we weren't going to get hit by an IED before we break the seal on our armored Humvees.
Hmm.
Um, think of switching on as a conscious act at first.
Hmm.
It's like if you've got a bad breaker in your home electric panel that keeps flipping off,
Hmm.
that's your mental state going back to its off mode. So when you realize it's off, you've got to switch it back on. But with enough practice, it will it will become second nature. And I consider switching on as the first of the three components of situational awareness. The other two are vanquishing denial and trusting your gut.
Yeah, I like the whole, you take a look at 5 yards and the 25 yards out when you get out of your car. And that when you're first starting to understand situational awareness, like I was a few years ago, those things are hard to do for the average person. So yeah, I like this whole thing about it becoming second nature if you just get into it. I like the fuse box metaphor a lot. And I think that's really good. But I really like what you just said was step two, and that is denial. And I will admit I have been the victim of denial a few times. So what is it that once I switch on, how do I deal with denial? What's step number two here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, think of it as vanquishing denial. It's basically an enemy to be conquered and vanquished. Um, Denial has an impressive body count, man. It's filled with people who believe that it couldn't happen to them and it
Yep.
wasn't happening right here, right
Yep.
now.
Mm-hmm.
Just watch the news after a mass shooting. I've seen people
Ah,
say they thought it was fireworks going off in the mall
yeah.
food court.
Yep.
Fireworks do not go off in the mall food court. You know. Then you see
Mm-mm.
video of people on the street in an urban area where drive-by shootings are common. At the first shot, these people react instantly like combat veterans. There is no second guessing. There is no denial on their part because they've already gained the experience. And I've heard it said that experience is something you get right after you need it. Well,
Yeah.
these people, they've already got the experience of being shot at, like
Right.
combat veterans, you know.
Right.
Um, Another example I've heard over and over is that the victim of a violent attack knew something was wrong as the
Yeah.
attacker approached. They didn't want to be accused of stereotyping based on a
Right.
person's race or perceived socioeconomic status.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so the victim takes no action and has the bad actors closing the distance.
Right.
In cases like this, it's a combination of denial and failure to trust one's own, gut instinct, which is the third component.
Right.
So it's yeah. So basically, it's like these three components are like a Venn diagram, and where it all comes together is situational awareness. You have to
Right.
all three have to be in action.
Right. There's a few times that I don't know. I bet a lot of people listening can relate to this one. I'll be laying in bed and I hear a noise. And the first thing that I do, Mike, when I hear that noise is I don't jump up. I don't go look for it. I'll admit this. I sit in bed and I wait to see if that noise happens again. I
You
was like,
hear
if
it
it
again.
happens again, then I'm gonna get up. Then it's
Yeah.
on. But otherwise, if I stay here under the covers, the monster can't get me. And
Yeah.
that's how denial hurts us, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Denial is insidious. I mean, it pervades so much of our lives, and people need to accept the fact that evil exists in the world and bad
Yeah,
things can happen to good
yeah.
people. You've That's the first step in vanquishing denial. You have to understand that it can happen. It's not just happens to someone on the news. It can happen to you, man.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, if you only drive defensively when your kids are in the car, you're in denial when you drive alone.
Mm-hmm.
People got to live in the world as it actually exists with all the good and bad that surrounds us. Think of situational awareness as the defensive driving of your entire life.
I like that.
Not just the part where
Yeah,
you're in the car.
yeah.
Our modern sensibilities fight against our gut instincts. We want to deny that the person cruising slowly towards us in the grocery store parking lot is a threat, while that tiny inner voice is saying, "Get in the car and lock the doors now."
Mm-hmm.
Um, call it what you will, gut instinct, women's intuition, whatever. It's that primitive ice age part of our brains that's been warning us of danger for thousands of years, and it's constantly at war with denial. But that inter hunter gatherer we all have has to win
Mm-hmm.
that fight.
Yeah, yeah. You're
The
right. And
worst
what
that
I
can happen, yeah, sorry, I mean, the worst that can happen if you trust your instinct saying you're wrong is nothing.
right,
There
right.
might be some slight embarrassment for a few moments, but anyone who might have seen you react is going to be out of your life within a matter of moments, and they're quickly going to forget you.
Right.
If you
Right.
give
And
in
what's
denial and yeah, if you give in to denial and you're wrong, the results can be catastrophic.
yeah, I would rather be wrong and still alive than dead and be like, "Oh, I knew it." You know,
Yep.
I knew there was
Yeah.
something about that guy. But yet you were talking about denial is of course, within that 25-foot radius, of us personally, physically. But you
Mhm.
also talked about denial is something that kind of hurts us socially. It hurts us in our environment because we're not seeing the world for really where it is. I call that living in a bubble for folks who have listened to my podcast.
Mhm.
I call that living in a bubble, and I try to help people get out of that bubble. It's part of the purpose of the show to see what is really out there. So, for your friends and your family, how do you get them? How do you get them to get out of that bubble?
One of the things is, putting the phone down.
Mm,
People walk around with their faces buried in the phone. It's like, I'm just me. Their bubble is no wider than their shoulders. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
if that, you've got to pay attention. You've got to become, kind of an amateur student of human behavior.
hmm,
You know, I believe in profiling people, but it's based on behavior, demeanor. Do they look like they're, you know, do they have a predatory look about them? Is there just some weird vibe? Again, that's that gut instinct.
hmm.
It's kind of ringing that little warning bell.
Right. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit more about the your take on the gut instinct, which by the way, I always think it's funny that it's women's intuition, but for men it's gut instinct. It sounds like all scientific when you talk to it, but as well, it's women's intuition. Now that's be respected. But if it's gut instinct, like are you sure it's just not indigestion?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds cooler for a guy to say gut instinct than
I guess. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
male or human intuition.
Right.
But honestly, it's what it is. It's You're subconsciously picking up on the signals around you,
Hmm.
right? How people are interacting, someone paying attention to you. But if you haven't consciously switched on, you're not going to hear the subconscious.
Mm-mm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does.
And like I said, and women are really good at it. I mean, especially good at it. I've got some, story maybe I'll tell a little bit later about, how it works with my wife. But yeah, women's intuition, believe it.
Yes.
If you're out there, with your wife, girlfriend, or somebody, daughter, and they perceive something wrong, pay attention to them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so help me in this. I encounter this in my personal life, and I encounter this sometimes on social media with people talk about the secure dad. It's, Andy, you're just being paranoid. When you talk about, situational awareness or switching on denial, that's all just paranoia. Who is going to want to ever hurt you? You're just nuts. How do you help a person like that if they even want to be helped?
Well, I tell them that I'm not paranoid, but I choose to live in a heightened state of awareness.
Hmm.
And that was a phrase that was actually used in some of that gray area training that I went through on active duty. It's like, we're not paranoid. We live in a heightened state of awareness. And I mean, I do encounter it. Even my mother, who's still with us, often when I talk about this, she often thinks I'm paranoid. But funny when cities started burning, a few years ago, and the crime was going up, she asked me to help her pick out her first handgun
Hmm.
in her 80s.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's yeah.
So
And when people are faced with stuff like that, it's oh wait, it's maybe Mike was right this whole time. Maybe I should have been doing that. I guess that's all that part of dealing with denial.
people just kind of bury their heads, and a lot of them they don't watch their local news, which I think is important to watch to see what's going on in your
Right,
city or your area. And it's like, oh, this shooting, well, it's just gang on gang. Okay, but what innocent people were in between,
right.
and could they have seen the signs?
Yeah. Yeah, just because you weren't particularly involved in that particular event that happened in your community doesn't mean that something similar couldn't develop around you. Yeah. So yeah, just understanding, what the differences are.
Yeah,
Um,
you worry about just like in combat out in the streets, you're not worried so much about the bullet that has your name on it. You're worried about all the bullets that are addressed to whom it may concern.
yeah, yeah, very true, very true. Because sometimes uh, a lot of people think that when you talk about situational awareness and the paranoia that comes with it, it's because somebody is always after you. And you're making the very good point here that you just may stumble into something that, you may take the wrong exit on the interstate or something may develop like road rage around you, where all of a
Yep,
sudden you do actually have to pay attention to what's going on.
absolutely right. I said it may not involve you, it just might become collateral damage.
So I know that you've done, a ton of stuff across the globe. Can you share with us a time where like your intuition really kicked in and you understood that hey, there is something really going here. There's a threat that I've got to deal with. Is there some sort of story or anecdote that you can share with us to really kind of help bring this together?
Yeah, one that really sticks out, believe it or not, wasn't overseas. It was a little over about an hour and a half from where I live, and this was in downtown Seattle. Um, Probably a handful of years ago. Seattle used to be a beautiful city. I mean, I
Mhm.
would recommend people come there all the time, but it's just over the past decade or more, it's been going downhill fast. Um, yeah, we'd finished the training exercise for the day, and I was walking across the city heading back to my hotel, being switched on. My personal security radar was scanning while my body language and demeanor blended in with those around me because I'm trying not to stand
Mhm.
out, which is also
Right.
part of our training.
Yes.
Um, but as I approached a traffic light and then the crosswalk to go to cross that street, I looked ahead down the block, and probably about half block up, there was three or four young men. And for those familiar with Seattle, this would be the Third and Pine area, which has kind of gotten notorious now. Um, yeah, they were stationary, somewhat separated, but something just told me they were together and appeared to be
Hmm.
waiting for something.
Hmm.
So, and going straight would have been the direct line towards my hotel where I eventually had to go, but instead I took a right, went down to the next block, and then crossed over. So I basically kind of went behind them on their one street over. And as I reached the end of the block, I hear, again, it's not fireworks, but I heard gunshots going off from around that corner. People were running. Police got there pretty quick. Um, but of course, I just kept going, get out of the area.
Right. Right.
But on the local news that night, I learned it was an attempted robbery. The victim was wounded,
Mm.
and the description of the suspects matched what I saw halfway up the block.
Wow.
So
Wow.
in this case for me, nothing happened, which is the desired outcome.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, something didn't seem right, so I reacted.
Yeah.
You know.
That's amazing. Yeah. You made just a great point here in telling us the story about how to kind of blend in, because I know that a lot of times when people start to practice situational awareness, they can't can't blend into their environment because they're the guy who is always staring or looking or has that mission focus on their face, which makes them the anomaly for that baseline. So what's how do we still keep our cool while having our heightened state of awareness?
And that's one of the classes that we have. It's called image projection and demeanor, and it's you got to have that. It's relaxed alertness. It's situational awareness is relaxed alertness. So make sure you appear relaxed.
Right.
No, that's it. Look at the people around you. Study your baseline
Hmm.
of what's happening around you. I mean, if you're the only Westerner in a foreign country, at least on that street, everyone's got to notice you anyway. But you don't want to appear like you're ready to jump out of your skin.
Hmm.
Kind of be relaxed, act as like you belong as much as possible, and just you can casually scan, you can casually turn your head without acting like oh, what was that scene from John Belushi in Animal House years and years ago, where
Yeah.
he's jumping around and looking in all directions
Yeah.
before
Oh
he
yeah.
breaks
Yeah.
into
Yeah. Yeah.
somewhere.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
don't be that guy. Just look at the folks around you. The folks who aren't switched on are probably how you want to look until something comes up on your security radar. Then you can focus on
Right.
that. But
R-
we tell people to dress in earth tones. It's kind of a broader color palette than you think. The earth
mhm.
tones, because I mean there'll be some blues and reds in there, but they're just more muted.
Right.
Um, don't have the expensive watch. I might maybe just save that to for a special occasion somewhere. But blending in to your environment is a big part of it.
Right. Yeah.
We actually go into it in some detail in our training.
Yeah, I bet so. I bet so. And I remember I took my wife to the mall. I think it's like 2 or 3 Christmases ago now. And I haven't been to, a mall. I'm just not a mall person. I know that comes as a huge shock to you, but I'm not a mall person.
I'm
And
with you on that.
I was walking through, and this was like the mall had just opened. This is like 10:01 on a Saturday morning in November. And everybody in the mall was on their phone. People who were sitting on their benches were on the phone. People walking were on their phone. What made me stand out was the fact that I wasn't on my phone. That's why I was just, I feel uncomfortable. So I literally just pulled my phone out and just opened my email to nothing in particular and just held it out in front of me just so that I could sort of blend into what was going on around me.
Yeah, you're adjusting to the baseline.
Yeah, and it was just kind of weird. It was, we make these jokes and stuff, but when you actually go out into the environment and you see these sorts of things happening, and you realize, yeah, this is how we move through our environment has drastically changed since the invention of the smartphone.
Hmm.
And but even though that has changed, I think you would say some of the basic tells of someone about to commit some sort of act still hasn't changed because that part of our human behavior is still intact, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The from several years ago, we were teaching a physical surveillance and counter surveillance course, and early on, the students they hadn't a lot of them hadn't gotten the demeanor part down yet, and we sent the person that is being followed when you do surveillance training is called the rabbit.
Hmm.
So we sent the rabbit into this mall in a midwestern city, and okay, surveillance team they start going in. These are all brand new folks just trying to learn the skill. Before long, mall security was on them because they weren't matching the baseline, and they
Yeah.
were getting approached and said, "What's going on? What are you guys up to?"
Hmm. That's funny. Yeah, mall security stops you. You have to you have to make some changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Mike, I so appreciate this time that we've got to talk. Is there anything else that you want, families to know about what it really means to keep yourself safe in today's day and time?
Yeah, you have to be present in the moment. Yeah, you absolutely have to be present in the moment. That's part of the mental game. That's part of switching on. Keep our noses out of the phones, as we both talked about. You got to note who's around you and see if those faces keep popping up in proximity to you to the
Yep.
point where it can't be coincidence.
Right.
Example I hear about over and over is women being followed by men in grocery stores.
Hmm.
Um, my wife is highly trained in physical surveillance and counter surveillance. In fact, on for a surveillance mission, give me a team of women every time. Um, they're the best. But she's picked up on this behavior several times in grocery stores, and when it happens, she'll change her pattern of movement through the store.
Mm.
She trusts her instincts enough to where that if that tiny voice says women's intuition, gut instinct, whatever you want to call it, if that tiny voice says leave, she'll get out of sight of the follower, abandon the cart, and get out of the store and make sure she's not followed back to her vehicle. She'll just walk away and get out of there.
Yeah.
And that's you don't need to be trained to see this. You just need to be switched on.
Right.
Don't let denial convince you it's a coincidence when you're on the fourth aisle together, but the creepy dude doesn't seem to be putting anything in his grocery cart.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that. I was at a Costco and I noticed there were two guys, a little bit older, retired age, and they were wearing Kirkland brand clothes. They had nothing in their carts, and bless both their hearts, they had the earpiece in that you could see from like 10 feet away. And I'm like, oh, fellas, come on, you almost had it. You need to
Yeah.
pile this cart full of stuff, what? But yeah. So I get it. I hear you.
And now that when you're trained, you'd be surprised what you can see in cities like Seattle or elsewhere. Then you see other people, probably from government agencies, going through their training on the street.
Yeah.
And and you can tell when they're brand new because they're making the same goofy mistakes that we made when we were brand new. And it's just really amazing what you can see. If you're in the Virginia area around just outside the DC Beltway, you see that all the time.
Yeah, there's been actually, I think I just remembered this. Like my wife and I were out somewhere like well over a decade ago, and she's like, "This is kind of odd, something that was going on." I was like, "Yeah, I think it's a training exercise, so don't worry about it. I think everything's going to be fine here." But
Hmm.
yeah, it's funny how when you see those little anomalies, they just poke out at you.
And so when we train folks in counter surveillance, which is what corporate executives, the high net worth folks, that's what they need more than surveillance,
Mm,
obviously. But we start them out with teaching them a little bit of surveillance so they know what it looks like, and it's really interesting to see them do it, and then eventually turn around and be able to spot it when they're under surveillance.
very cool. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. Where can people find out more about your business online?
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Our website is adopcon, ADOPCON.com. We're on Instagram at AOC_security, and which is where we do most of the social media.
Mhm.
And folks can write to us at AOC.security@adopcon.com.
Very cool. And by the way, I do absolutely suggest that everybody follow you on Instagram. You put out phenomenal content to try to just educate the average person. And man, I so appreciate that.
I appreciate what you're doing as well. I've been following you for quite a while.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
All right, take care, Andy.
That's all that we have for the podcast for today. Thank you, friend, for listening. I appreciate Mike for being on the show. For more on him and advanced operational concepts, go to adopcon.com. Go to adopcon. Go to adopcon.com. Take control of your personal private data with Delete Me. Get 20% off a privacy plan when you use the code DAD at checkout. If you want your kids to have a smartphone but not access to the entire internet or social media, then consider a phone from TrueMe Wireless. Use code SecureDad at checkout for $50 off a phone. I'm Andy Murphy reminding you that our safety is our own responsibility.